They say the Blackwood River ain't truly made of water. It's made of time. Old man Silas, who used to pole his skiff up and down it before he went blind, always claimed that what the Blackwood takes, it holds on to, and what it gives back wrong. Lily, bless her heart, knew that story better than anybody in Willow Creek, but she didn't care for it one bit. She knew what the river had taken from her. Her James, her love, her whole tomorrow. It had happened 6 months prior, on a sudden, cruel May morning when the river swelled like a hungry belly. James had been testing the old pier for their future little cabin, and one plank, just one, had given way beneath him. The cold water grabbed him fast, and by the time the search party found his faded blue shirt tangled in a snag downstream, Lily's world had gone dry as a cotton drought. But Lily, she had a different kind of faith than the rest of Willow Creek. They all saw the empty grave marker, the fresh mound of earth, the black dress she still wore, but Lily saw James's promise. They were supposed to marry at the river's edge, under the ancient cypress. So now, every day, sunup to sundown, she returned. She brought a wicker chair, a half-used spool of cotton thread, and a thermos of lukewarm tea. She didn't weep anymore. Weeping was for those who accepted defeat. Lily just waited. Her waiting was a silent accusation to the whole town. Her sister, Clara, a sensible woman with sharp elbows and a heart of gold, was the one who bore the brunt of it. Clara drove the pickup down the dusty track every evening, her face a map of worry, to bring Lily home. "Lily, honey, it's getting dark. The air's turning sharp. He ain't coming back like this, you hear me? The river keeps its dead." Lily would simply shake her head, her gaze fixed on the spot where the current ran fastest, the spot she now called the door. Clara hated that word. It implied an entrance, a coming and going, not a closing off forever. One evening, Clara found a small, wet gray stone resting on Lily's wicker chair. It was smooth and cold, and Lily was tracing a symbol on it, a half-heart. "Look, Clara," Lily whispered, her voice husky from disuse. "He left me a message. This is half of the promise stone we picked out at the fair." Clara snatched it up, her common sense rising like bile. "Lily, this is just a rock. The river washes up 1,000,000 rocks a day. It means nothing. It's the current, baby, not a courier." But as Clara tossed the stone back into the brush, Lily didn't scream or argue. She just smiled. A slow, unsettling smile that made Clara feel colder than the river mist. The true conflict wasn't between Lily and the river. It was between Lily's heart and Clara's reason. And Lily's heart was stubborn as an old mule in a ditch. It wouldn't move for anything. The next day, the waiting began to take on a strange new quality. It wasn't just passive hope anymore. It was a conversation. Lily sat with her fingers trailing in the cold water, and she started speaking to James. At first, it was quiet, simple things. "The tomatoes are coming in good this year, James. Clara bought a new hat, the silly thing." But then she began to ask deeper questions, the kind that tear a soul in two. "Did you feel me searching for you? Are you cold, my love?" And the river, or maybe it was the rustling leaves of the towering cottonwoods, seemed to answer back with a subtle change in rhythm. The water wouldn't simply rush. It would sigh. One afternoon, a piece of driftwood, bone-white and shaped like a long, thin finger, nudged the bank right at her feet. Lily picked it up, felt impossibly light. She didn't see it as debris. She saw it as a signpost. She took her knife and carved James's initial, J, into the wood, and then she tied a piece of that cotton thread around it, a thread from the spool meant for mending their future bedsheets. Now, when Clara came, the conversation wasn't about going home. It was about what Lily was going to do next. Clara saw the driftwood staff and nearly wept. "Lily, you look like a saint in a painting, but saints don't wait for ghosts. They move mountains, honey. They don't just stare at the water." The waiting drew attention, as impossible, stubborn acts always do in a small town. The ladies of Willow Creek, led by the stern, silver-haired Martha, started holding what they called prayer meetings near the public boat launch, which was just 100 yards upriver from Lily's spot. They weren't praying for Lily. They were praying about Lily. They spoke of the shame she was bringing to the family name, the unseemliness of her grief, the thin line between fidelity and madness. Martha told Clara, "That river is the devil's bathtub, Clara, and your sister is bathing right in his hope. You bring her to church, or we will have to stage an intervention for her soul." Clara felt her loyalty split down the middle. She loved Lily, but Martha had a way of using words that felt like sharp scissors. One morning, the river, perhaps sensing the communal judgment, changed its tone entirely. It grew quiet, smooth as oil, reflecting the sky's unsettling gray color. When Lily looked down, she didn't see her own face in the water. She saw a ripple that looked exactly like James's hand, reaching up, then receding. She gasped, dropping her mug. The water was silent again, but the message was clear. "I am here. Keep watching." That day, Lily didn't wait in her chair. She stood, wading in until the hem of her black dress was soaked and heavy, defying Martha and her prayers, defying the laws of nature. The increasing length of Lily's wait, the 7-month mark, then the 8, began to affect her health and her ties to the world. She grew thin, her cheekbones too sharp, her eyes taking on the peculiar, far-off glaze of someone who spends more time looking at what isn't there than what is. Her hair, once a cascade of bright copper, hung dull and lifeless. The only solid thing in her life was the riverbank. Her money was running low. James had left her a small insurance policy, but Clara was handling the bills, and Clara was starting to hold back, hoping the financial pressure would force Lily home. This created the first sharp conflict between the sisters since the drowning. "I need money for more tea and a new blanket, Clara," Lily said one freezing November afternoon. Clara slammed her purse onto the kitchen table. "You need money for rent. You need money for food. You do not need money for a vigil, Lily. We are running out of funds because you won't accept what God has given you. A tragedy to mourn and move past." Lily's voice was dangerously low. "He's not a tragedy. He's my waiting husband. If you stop the money, I'll sell James's watch. I will sell the ring. Do not test me, Clara." Clara backed down, horrified by the threat, realizing Lily valued her phantom husband more than James's final, physical tokens. This desperate devotion, this willingness to sacrifice the past to secure the future she dreamed of, chilled Clara to the bone and kept her coming back to the riverbank. It was in this dark, cold stretch of waiting that Ben started showing up. Ben was a quiet man, a carpenter who had helped James with the plans for their cabin before the accident. He was solid, square-shouldered, and had the kindest eyes in the county. He didn't come to argue or preach. He came to work. He started fixing the rickety old fishing shack 100 yards down from Lily's spot, just giving her space, hammering nails into wood in a steady, reassuring rhythm. Lily ignored him for weeks. Then, one bitter morning, she realized Ben hadn't brought lunch with him. He was just steadily working, his breath fogging in the air. Later that day, a small paper sack appeared beside Lily's chair. Inside was a thick slice of Clara's apple pie and a note written on the back of a receipt. "Didn't want you to starve before he shows. B." It was the first act of grace Lily had received in months, an acknowledgement of her state without judgment. She ate the pie slowly, savoring the taste of the living world again. The next day, she called out, "Thank you, Ben." Ben just nodded, didn't stop working, didn't try to chat. This was a new, slow-burning conflict for Lily. The river, which offered eternal, ghostly love, and Ben, who offered silent, solid, present-day kindness. The river, jealous perhaps of the small connection Ben had fostered, decided to make its move. The next day, the water was an angry, opaque brown, and it was loud, a low, constant growl that made the ground tremble. Lily felt a sudden, sharp clarity, a sense of James's presence being closer than ever, but also in pain. She felt a deep, pulling urge to step into the water. She stood at the edge, the driftwood staff clutched in her hand, leaning forward against the pull of the current. Just as her foot lifted to take the plunge, she heard a muffled, distinct sound from the river, not a gurgle or a slosh, but a word. It sounded like, "Wait." It was deep, waterlogged, and undeniably James's voice, not in her memory, but in the air. Lily froze, her foot hovering. The river roared, then settled, the brown water still angry, but the sound of the word had broken the spell. She stumbled back onto the muddy bank, weeping not from grief, but from pure, shattering confirmation. James was trapped. He was communicating. He was telling her not to join him, but to wait. The revelation brought a terrifying focus to her vigil. From that day on, Lily didn't just wait. She became a listener, trying to decipher the Blackwood's language. Ben, seeing the change in her, the feverish intensity replacing the dull, settled grief, started getting closer. He knew something had shifted. He found her one afternoon trying to skim the water with a tea strainer, desperately trying to catch the voice. He sat beside her, not saying a word, just watching the river. "He spoke to me," Lily finally whispered, her eyes wide. "He told me to wait." Ben sighed, tossing a small pebble into the current. "Lily, I know you loved him. We all did. But the river makes funny sounds, especially when the wind hits the banks just right. It'll make you hear what you want to hear." Lily turned on him, fire in her eyes, the first real passion he'd seen in her since before the funeral. "Don't you dare tell me what I want, Ben." You didn't hear the desperation in that word. "He's in there, Ben. He's calling." Ben didn't flinch. "I believe you heard something, Lily. I just don't believe it was a miracle. But say it was. Say he's trapped in a sunken pocket of air, calling out. What good does your waiting do? If he's a ghost, he needs a priest. If he's a person, he needs a rescue. You're doing neither. You're just sitting." This blunt, challenging honesty was exactly what Lily needed to hear. It introduced the necessary element of action. Her waiting was passive. James's word demanded active waiting. The idea of active waiting led Lily down a new, obsessive path: research. She stopped at the small Willow Creek library, a place she hadn't visited since grade school. She spent hours poring over local history, old maps, and faded newspapers. She wasn't looking for James. She was looking for the Blackwood. She found ancient articles about the river's strange history. A collapsed gold mine near the northern bend, an old ferry that sank in the 1920s, and a forgotten community of river people who were rumored to have built their homes on floating barges anchored to the deepest part of the river. The most compelling artifact was a brittle map of the riverbed, hand-drawn by a former Army Corps of Engineers man in 1948. It showed a deep, narrow, almost vertical crevice near where James had drowned, marked simply as the pit. The description with the map noted that the pit was a natural limestone sinkhole that created a massive, sustained whirlpool when the river was high. Lily realized James hadn't just been pulled under. He had been sucked into an underwater chimney. Her fear transformed into a horrifying certainty. James wasn't drifting downstream. He was trapped deep below the surface, in a chamber the river used as a stomach. Armed with this terrifying knowledge, Lily knew she couldn't simply sit. She needed to look inside the pit, or at least feel around it. She started borrowing or outright stealing small items from Clara's garage. A long, heavy rope, a grappling hook, an old lead fishing weight. Clara, noticing the missing tools, confronted her. "What in God's name are you building, Lily? A scarecrow to chase the gulls?" Lily was evasive, her face drawn tight with purpose. "I'm checking the stability of the bank, Clara. Don't worry yourself." But Clara followed her one afternoon and found Lily on the bank, throwing the lead weight attached to the rope repeatedly into the water, measuring the depth inch by painful inch near the door. Clara watched from the cottonwoods, tears streaming down her face, horrified by the image of her sister fishing for the body of her fiancé. She finally stepped out. "You stop this right now, Lily. That water is dangerous. You're going to fall in and then we'll have 2 funerals." Lily's eyes held no love, only cold, focused determination. "If I fall in, I'll find him sooner, and you'll have one big party. Now go home, Clara. You're scaring him away." The sisters stood in a silent, freezing standoff, the river rushing between them like a vast, cold jury. Clara eventually retreated, defeated by the chilling logic of Lily's reply. The local community's patience was wearing thin. Martha, seeing Lily's increased activity on the bank, decided to take definitive action. She organized a small group of church members and approached the local sheriff, a tired old man named Sheriff Tate. "She is a danger to herself, Sheriff," Martha declared, her voice ringing with self-righteous certainty. "She's playing with ropes and weights. She is clearly suicidal. We need to have her committed for her own sake and for the peace of this town." Sheriff Tate, who had known Lily since she was a little girl with scraped knees, hated the idea. He knew this wasn't madness. It was a profound, stubborn love. But Martha's words carried weight. He drove out to the riverbank later that day. He didn't approach Lily's spot. Instead, he spoke to Ben, who was now quietly building a sturdy wooden bench near the fishing shack. "Ben, she's got to stop. The ladies are pressuring me to bring in the state authorities. It's either I bring her in or they do. And believe me, the state won't be gentle." Ben looked at the river, then at Lily, who was meticulously scraping mud off a piece of rope. "Give me 2 days, Sheriff. Just 2. I think I can talk her into moving her vigil back from the bank, maybe setting up a proper memorial. She needs time, not handcuffs." The sheriff agreed, but the clock was ticking, and Lily was about to make her boldest move yet. That night, Lily couldn't sleep. The word wait echoed in her mind, sounding less like a warning and more like an instruction to prepare. She felt an urgent need to know what she was waiting for. She knew she couldn't pull James out, but perhaps she could send a message in. She thought of the cotton thread, the one she had promised to use for their linen. She knew thread wasn't a good conductor of anything but worry. She needed something that could truly carry a message through the cold, deep water. She remembered a story from her grandmother about river folk using music to call fish out of deep holes. Music was a wave, a vibration. Lily, though having no musical talent, owned a delicate silver bell James had given her. A small, tinny thing he'd won at a carnival. It was a joke gift, but precious now. Lily climbed out of bed, her determination a cold, hard lump in her stomach. She tied the bell securely to the end of the rope she'd been using to measure the pit. She knew what she had to do. Drop the bell into the deepest part of the sinkhole and wait for James to ring it back. It was absurd, beautiful, and utterly desperate. The morning dawned heavy and gray, the perfect shroud for Lily's terrible task. She went to the river early, before Ben, before Clara, before the judgmental ladies and the weary sheriff. She stood exactly over the spot she had marked as the door. The river was silent, almost holding its breath. She took the silver bell, pressed it to her lips, and whispered her promise to James, that she would never forget him, that she would wait forever. Then, with a prayer that felt more like a curse, she dropped the weight and the bell over the edge. The rope unspooled rapidly, much faster and much deeper than she had expected. She let it go until the rope went taut, and then she anchored it to the thick root of the old cypress tree. She sat back in her wicker chair, ignoring the cold, ignoring the mud seeping into her socks, and just stared at the rope. The minutes stretched into hours. She was waiting for a chime that would mean impossible life, or the rope simply snapping, which would mean certain death. The waiting was agony, 1,000 times worse than the months of passive grief. The suspense was unbearable, a knot twisting in her chest, but she wouldn't leave. Just as the sun reached its highest point, casting a pale, weak reflection on the water, Ben arrived. He saw the rope, thick and new, disappearing into the water and anchored to the cypress. He saw Lily, absolutely still, staring at the rope like it was a viper ready to strike. He didn't ask what she'd done. He knew. "Lily," he said, quietly, standing a safe distance away. "The sheriff's coming back tomorrow." Martha called him. "You gotta do something different today." Lily didn't look at him. Her voice was a dry rasp. "I'm not moving, Ben. I sent him a piece of me. I'm waiting for him to send a piece of him back." Ben slowly sat down on his new wooden bench. He didn't try to reason. He just shared her vigil. He stayed there for hours watching the rope, watching Lily. He wanted to break the rope, to pull it up and show her the ridiculous silent bell. But he couldn't. He knew if he broke her faith now, she would break completely. They sat in perfect silence for the entire afternoon, the two of them, the woman lost in the past and the man stuck in the present, bound by the indifferent river. Then, just as the evening mist began to creep across the surface, coating the Blackwood in a silvery gauze, the impossible happened. The rope, which had been perfectly still for 8 hours, gave a tiny, almost imperceptible twinge. Then another. Then, a distinct, rhythmic tug-tug-tug. It wasn't the current. The current was a low, constant pressure. This was a deliberate signal. Lily shot to her feet, her hands flying to the rope, feeling the vibration travel up the heavy hemp. It wasn't the chime of the bell, but the pull of something on the other end. She looked at Ben, her eyes radiating a terrifying, triumphant certainty. Ben was pale, his practical mind reeling. He started to speak, to offer some logical explanation. A passing fish, a snag. But the rope tugged again, hard enough to pull Lily's hand forward. "He's alive?" Lily whispered, a sound of pure, impossible joy. "He's not a ghost, he's trapped. He heard the bell and he's fighting." Ben knew he couldn't let her pull the rope by herself. He rushed to her side, grabbing the rope just below her hands. The rope was freezing and heavy, but the tugging, though sporadic, was undeniable. They began to pull, the two of them, hauling the heavy, waterlogged rope inch by painful inch. Lily was manic, her strength drawn from a source beyond her thin body. Ben was pulling with the grim determination of a man fighting a wild animal. The effort was immense. The weight they were pulling seemed to increase the closer it got to the surface. It felt heavier than the lead weight they had dropped. The suspense was suffocating. Every foot of rope brought a new wave of fear. Was it James's body? Was it just a piece of debris that had momentarily snagged and been pulled loose? Finally, after 20 minutes of grueling labor, the line surfaced. There was the lead weight, and there was the silver bell, tarnished but whole. But tied just above the bell, secured tightly by a piece of fine, white, silky thread, was a small, smooth piece of river glass. It was green, perfectly polished by the current, and shaped like a tear. On one side, scratched deeply into the glass, was the matching half-heart symbol from the stone Lily had found months ago. The message was clear, heartbreaking, and undeniable. "I am here, but I cannot cross." The immediate elation and terror of the discovery left Lily completely drained. She collapsed onto the muddy bank, clutching the piece of river glass to her chest, her breathing shallow and ragged. Ben, utterly stunned by the confirmation of the impossible, that James was somehow communicating from below, sat beside her, his arms wrapped around his knees, staring at the black water. He was a man of logic, of wood and nails, but he had just hauled proof of a spectral prisoner from the Blackwood. He knew that this single piece of glass had just shattered any chance of Lily ever returning to a normal life. The river wasn't just a place of grief. It was a prison where James was still fighting, and Lily was his sole connection to the sunlit world. "What does it mean, Ben?" Lily whispered, her voice cracking. "Why is he in there? Why can't he come out?" Ben didn't have an answer. "It means," he said slowly, "that we're not waiting for a ghost anymore, Lily. We're waiting for a miracle, and miracles take action." The discovery had transformed the conflict. It was no longer Lily versus reality. It was Lily and Ben versus the river's secret. The discovery changed everything for Ben. He couldn't dismiss Lily as mad anymore. He became her reluctant partner in the vigil, abandoning his carpentry work to help her figure out the river's cruel game. They built a small, sturdy platform right at the edge of the pit, a proper observation post, defying Sheriff Tate and Martha, daring them to interfere. They started a logbook tracking the river's moods, the height, the color, the speed, and most importantly, the new, strange sounds Lily sometimes heard. These sounds weren't words. They were vibrations. A low, humming thrum that seemed to come from the earth itself. Lily believed James was telling them something mechanical, something about his entrapment. Ben, applying his knowledge of construction, finally started to agree. He remembered the old Army Corps map and the collapsed gold mine nearby. "Lily," he said, poring over the faded drawing, "if this is a sinkhole and it connects to the old mine tunnels, then James isn't in a water pocket. He's in an air pocket and he's in the old infrastructure. He's knocking on the pipework, trying to get our attention. This realization, that James was potentially alive and locked in a subterranean space, filled Lily with a horrifying new hope, and it gave their purpose a solid, terrifying focus. The more they studied the river, the more hostile it seemed to become. The Blackwood was a keeper of secrets, and it didn't like being probed. One morning, the platform they had built was completely destroyed. The heavy planks splintered and washed up 100 yards downriver. The anchor root of the cypress was scarred, as if something massive had dragged against it. Lily and Ben knew this wasn't just the current. "It's guarding him," Lily whispered, her voice shaking with fear and awe. "It doesn't want us to help him escape." The conflict had gained a new dimension. The river itself was sentient, or at least a host to something guarding James. They decided to change tactics. They couldn't fight the river's physical strength. They had to outsmart its nature. Ben remembered the river folk who used to navigate the deepest currents. He went into town and sought out Old Man Silas, the former skiff poler who was now blind and lived in a crumbling shack on the outskirts of Willow Creek. Silas was a reservoir of forgotten river lore, and Ben desperately needed his knowledge. Old Man Silas, a man whose hands were scarred with 1,000 river battles, listened to Ben's impossible story. The voice, the glass, the tugging rope without blinking. He sat on his porch swing, rocking slowly, the sound of the chains squeaking a rhythm older than the town. When Ben finished, Silas spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the dry ground. "The Blackwood ain't the water, boy," Silas rasped, his eyes milky white but his gaze unervingly focused. "It's the mud. The mud remembers everything. The Blackwood's got a mud heart. And if a body gets taken by the whirlpool, it gets stuck in the undermud, where the river keeps its trophies." He then shared a dark piece of lore. "The Blackwood demands a trade, boy. Takes what you value most. It won't give up a soul for nothing. Not for a rope, not for a bell. You want the man back? You gotta give it something equal in value to a human life." Ben left Silas's porch feeling sickened. Lily's problem had just escalated from a rescue mission to a magical, terrifying bargain with a sentient natural force. When Ben told Lily the new information, he was careful to leave out the part about the trade. He only focused on the mud heart concept, suggesting that James was suspended in a forgotten layer of silt and structure. But Lily, her subconscious now tuned to the dark language of folklore and desperate hope, saw through the omission. "What does it want, Ben?" she asked, looking directly into his eyes. "Silas said it demands a trade, didn't he? What does the river want more than a life?" Ben looked away, unable to lie completely. "He said it takes what you value most." Lily was silent for a long time, looking at the precious river glass in her palm. "It wants my life, Ben. It wants me to join him. But James told me to wait. He doesn't want me to sacrifice myself." She then had a terrifying realization. "The only thing I value more than my life, the only thing that could match the price of James, is my hope itself." Lily realized the river didn't want her body. It wanted her spirit broken, her waiting abandoned. It wanted her to give up and leave James forever. The suspense of the trade hung heavy over their next few weeks. Lily knew her resolve was the collateral in this negotiation. The river seemed to sense this, too, and started tormenting her with auditory hallucinations. Instead of the rhythmic tugging, she began hearing a woman crying just below the surface, a soft, despairing wail that chilled her to the core. It sounded like an old, deep sorrow, a forgotten tragedy. Lily couldn't stand the sound. She knew the river was showing her the fate of those who gave up their hope, the fate James was trying to save her from. She started playing music, not James's favorites, but loud, cheerful fiddle tunes on a portable radio Ben brought her. Anything to drown out the river's lament. She was fighting a psychological battle now, a war waged over her sanity, with the river as her silent, tormenting enemy.